When is it appropriate to ask somebody where they're from? Is it ever appropriate? Have you ever experienced it? Imagine you seated at the desk and then a colleague comes and asks you, "Hey, buddy, you have an interesting accent. I'm wondering, where are you from?" If you have an answer for that, stay tuned and let's chat about this. This is Jean-Claude Mituku and welcome to the Canadian Me. We build communities one story at a time. Today, I want to talk about a topic that's quite interesting, a topic that so many immigrants face on a daily basis. I don't want to say on a daily basis, but at least they have faced sometime either in a workspace, at church, or wherever they find themselves, including schools. Now, it's also a topic that's quite sensitive, and it's a topic related to identity and workspace and workplace well-being, and racism and cultural tolerance and intolerance. So if this is something that you're interested in, I hope you like this podcast. So many people have complained in the past that they are often asked questions about their origin during conversations in the office. And oftentimes they feel very uncomfortable, and sometimes even they feel like they're being put on a spot, uh, having to explain about their origin and why they sound the way they sound. And to some, that constitutes microaggression. They feel like, hey, just because I sound or look a little bit different from you does not give you the right to assume that I don't belong in this particular space. So, the question that we're exploring today is, when is it appropriate to ask people about their origin? And who should ask anyone about that? Is it even appropriate to do it? Is it even legal? Why should people care about wanting to learn about where other people are? And honestly, it's very subjective if you're to ask me, because I am one of those people who is very comfortable to share. I find myself a person who loves to tell jokes or to share things, my experiences. However, that's not always the case with other people. Some people just find that, hey, that's quite a private kind of a discussion. It's a very personal kind of question. So they prefer to avoid being asked or answering such questions. And I think it is very appropriate for us, or it's very important for us to understand that, hey, just because someone is different from us doesn't give us the right to engage them in these conversations. But I can also say that some people genuinely want to learn about what their team is all about, or where people in their team are from. And let's be honest, we are human beings, and human beings tend to be curious. And so there is always this debate back and forth, and whether or not we should be addressing these things, whether or not we should be, in fact, caring about the origin or the stories of the people we work with. So, like I said, these should always be treated on a case by case basis. And I'm sure your experience and your expectation when it comes to such questions might differ. Like I said, mine is that of openness, and I'm always willing to share. I'm always willing to discuss about my previous life, so the places where I've lived, the places I was born, the place where I grew up, but also to try and create those linkages. And the reason why I'm quite open is not because I'm naive, or is not because I don't get annoyed by these questions. Believe me, if you get asked this question every single day, it gets to the point where you just can't take it anymore. But I usually approach it from a place of education, and also I give people with whom I work the benefit of the doubt. So whenever somebody approaches me and they're quite curious about who I am as a person, I tend to be open. But that also requires a mind set shift, because I usually see myself as a human being. And whenever someone brings that question to me, if indeed they're genuine, which is really hard to prove sometimes, you can tell if somebody genuinely want to learn something from you. You can tell if someone is genuinely interested in knowing you. So usually if my senses tell me that, hey, this person means well, I will usually open up. But also the context in which I'm asked that question does matter. You know why? Because if I'm in a space where I have worked with this person, and they have proven to be willing or open enough to get to know me. We share some story, or we share a file together, or we have spent time together. We have talked about other subjects together, or we have broken that ice. I usually find it easier to engage them in such conversation. However, imagine the situation where you have never seen this person. This is the first time you've met them, and they're just approaching you with a sense of curiosity. Well, maybe they're, I don't know, innocent, but in many cases that can come out, that it can come off as being a little bit too, why are you asking me this right now? I don't even know you. So if there is no relationship between yourselves, sometimes it is better to wait. If you're indeed curious about somebody, there is always a, a proper time to engage in these personal questions. So for me, if you're to ask me when is it appropriate to ask somebody about their origin, about their family history, and XYZ, I think it's all contextual. But I will usually lean toward you can engage in those conversations once you have established a good enough relationship, once your collegial relationship has been built, once you've created a space that's built on trust, once your relationship has progressed to a point where now you can share personal stuff, there you can ask them. The other thing too is you cannot expect people to tell you about their history or about their origin if you never share things about yourself. So if you were one of those people who was always fascinated by people's stories, then you know what? Maybe sometimes becoming more personable as well, sharing your story itself could create a space where people also feel more comfortable chatting, talking to you about their own reality. So, think about things that way, so that you can avoid situations where you just randomly find somebody and you start asking them about whether or not uh, wherever they're from, they have houses and stuff. That can come off as being a little bit racist. It's going to come out as something, ignorance and racism and microaggression. But if you have established a relationship, a history together, you are genuinely curious about a person, then perhaps these questions can be entertained. But again, do it at your own what can I say, discretion, at your own discretion. But also you should be open to receiving whatever reaction the person you are asking that question, whatever reaction they have. You have to ensure that, hey, that reaction is valid. Don't play defensive, because like I said, you don't really know how often people have heard that question. You don't really know how often the person has been harassed. So if you ask somebody, where are you from? You have an interesting accent. Even if they're your friend, don't assume that just because you know each other, that conversation is going to go in a certain direction. Sometimes it could go south. And so you have to be ready to deal with the consequence of you asking that question. And the reason why I'm saying this again, bringing this topic, is because we all know that Black History Month here in Canada is just 22 days away. And I know so many people innocently and eagerly want to engage with people from different cultures, especially people from African countries or just Black people in general. So as you prepare yourself to engage them in conversations, as your curiosity sends you to speak to some, please be mindful, please be considerate, and please inform yourself as well before randomly asking people questions that sometimes could be offensive or triggersome. Okay, so just think about things in that context. If you're curious about somebody and you have built a relationship with that person, please engage in conversation softly. Don't be just too direct, be considerate, but also think about a space where you can ask them, a space that's more, I don't want to use the word intimate, but kind of a space that's positive, a space where you feel like their privacy is respected. Sometimes, you can just mean, calling or somebody to the side and ask them if they're willing to have a short conversation, a conversation that's positive, a conversation that based on curiosity. And honestly, being upfront with your intention sometimes can create a space where people are willing to chat with you. So that's that from a, how on whether or not asking people about their origin or their culture or why they sound a certain way, you know uh, you know I think it is worth preparing yourself, given that February is almost here and many people will be curious about different cultures, especially if you find yourself in a place where you are dealing with new people or people from different cultures, or you're assuming that people from different cultures are now surrounding you. You may want to prepare yourself before engaging in those conversations. And listen, if you are not comfortable yet to have these conversations, if you have not built solid relationships with people yet, I'll say take it easy. Take it easy. You don't have, maybe sometimes you have a question that's just itching you and you just want to ask it. You know what? Google. Do some research. There is a lot of information out there. Of course, verify it. And then from there, some questions are just very, very, I'll say simple questions that you can Google, that you can educate yourself, that you can read about. There's so many videos out there about cultures. So before you ask some of those questions like, oh, do they speak English in Uganda? Oh, you have a very good accent. Do people in Congo speak French? Before asking such questions, please educate yourself. There is a lot of stuff out there. And then if you genuinely have a question and you're curious, then there are better ways to engage. And I would like to say, that usually means building a relationship with somebody before you can jump into asking them that means building a relationship with a person before you can jump into asking them very personal questions. All right, now this goes to all the cultured people, people who come from different parts of the world. I'm going to call them immigrants. So if you're an immigrant, or if you are a colored person, or a racialized person, or somebody who falls within the racialized community, um, I would like to say that we should also learn to create spaces where we give people the benefit of the doubt. Now, I will not dictate to you how or whether you should accommodate such questions, but I think I can speak for some by saying that uh, there are some people who are genuinely keen and interested in learning about cultures. There are people who are just so curious about how the other part of the world works. And sometimes such people may approach you directly, and to you maybe it's a little bit aggressive, maybe it's not. And I'm sure you've experienced your own way within different contexts on how such questions can be asked. But as racialized people, as a black person, while I do understand that these questions can be triggersome, sometimes they can be very uh, let's call it what it is. They can sound quite racist. I don't want to see you should give people the benefit of the doubt, but at least create a space where either you can receive that question, or where you can say, hey, I'm not comfortable answering that question, and just keep it to that. Or if you're willing to share with them, be very honest about your own experience. For example, if a colleague of mine is asking me about my experience as a black man in Canada, I'm going to share my experience, and I'll qualify it by saying, hey, just know that my experience is different from another black man's experience. So, what I'm sharing with you is not a representation of every single black man in Canada. It is my own experience, and my experience might differ from other people's experience. So, being able to also be straightforward with your answers, or even simply saying, hey, I'm not ready to have this conversation with you, but most importantly, if indeed they were respectful in their approach, if they were considerate in their approach, I will say create that space And if you don't want to speak to them, it's your right. You can just kindly as well just say, hey, I don't think we're there yet to have that conversation, or simply, I don't want to have this conversation, and then respectfully give each other space. Now, if they decide to be confrontational and racist, then maybe you can, call them out on that. I don't know. If you're in a workspace, maybe you can just report them or something like that. But if indeed they're genuine and you're willing to share with them, please do that. And if you are not willing to share with them your own experiences or talk about your culture as well, just let them know, and let that be that. Just end it there. Um, and then just this is now for all of us. If there is any pointer I can give you, is that I think, regardless of what culture or what race or whatever, when it comes to relationships and talking to people and connecting with people, the most important thing is build a genuine relationship, build a community. And I'm not just talking to you in terms of, okay, you are my colleague and I'm just going to wait for Black History Month. And then when the Black History Month is, we will bring a potluck and then we're just going to share. I'm going to come wearing a cultural attire. No, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about building genuine relationships at work, building real friendships. And then usually these conversations will flow naturally. Listen, if I have a good relationship with you, then I'll definitely at some point, hopefully, share with you about my background. It feels less forced. It feels less awkward if these conversations happen naturally. And the only way to make these conversations happen naturally is by having genuine relationships. So if you're a white person, or you're a Canadian, or you're a Black, Asian Canadian, whatever it is, and you're curious to learn about a fellow Canadian who happens to come from Ghana or the Caribbean, I think we should put in a little bit more effort to diversify our friend circles, to diversify our spaces, so that we can learn naturally. We can learn about different cultures with ease. But if you wait for Diwali or for Kwanzaa or Black History Month to learn about, say, Black person's experience, that might be a little bit too much. And that's when we find ourselves in situations where, okay, we are saying things we shouldn't be saying, where people start misunderstanding each other. So I highly encourage you to not wait for February to find a Black friend, to not wait to February to talk to a Black coworker. I ask you to engage with your coworkers, regardless of race, every single day. Do your best. Put in some effort to know people, especially if you claim that you like people. If you claim that you like cultures, you should not wait for a specific date or a specific month. Engage with one another. And then if you also come from the other culture, please, if you can, create that space, especially if somebody's trying, give them a chance, because I'm all for that. I'm all for building communities. And if someone is genuinely interested in learning about you, if they have shown interest in you as a person, I say we create spaces, man. We, at least for me, I can say I'm Canadian, and I'm all about building a community as diverse as possible, to try and learn from as many people as possible. That curiosity should never be shut down. So if someone is indeed, truly, and genuinely interested, so that curiosity should never be shut down. If someone is interested in learning about me, or is interested in learning about a certain culture, or has the need to learn about some things, and I know that I can help them, at least just give them some knowledge or point them to a resource, please, let's be open to that. Let's be open to positivity. And indeed, if you are uncomfortable, you don't have to, but at least be respectful in the way that you interact with one another. This is Jean-Claude Mutuku, and that was the Canadian Me, where we build communities one story at a time. Just to conclude, I would like to say that I want to thank those 2 or 3 subscribers that we have right now. Thank you. And listen, if you like what you hear, please share the podcast with other people, and we will continue to share some cool stories. Again, I conclude by saying, yeah, uh, let's be open and to answer the question of when or whether it is ever a good thing to ask people about where they're from. I say it depends. But what's more important is that the effort we put in To learn about people's cultures, to learn about people, to build relationships should be a continuous thing. We should not wait for a specific time. If you're curious about people, engage with them every single day, respectfully. And most importantly, um, be nice. Be nice to one another. Cheers.